The devastating floods that engulfed Brazil's southern state of Rio Grande do Sul have etched a permanent scar on the country's chronicles.
Olha aí como é que tá a situação, ó, só os telhados das casas de fora, ó. Olha a cratera que ficou lá pro lado do galpão do Marajá, ó. Aí até a igreja, ó.
The state bore the brunt of the disaster, with the floods inflicting extensive damage and loss of life. The deluge originated from a series of storms that impacted nearly two-thirds of the state's 498 municipalities. The situation worsened when a dam at a hydroelectric facility located between the cities of Bento Gonçalves and Cotiporá partially gave way.
Como que desce?
Entire cities in the Taquari River Valley, including Lajado and Estrela, were entirely submerged. The incessant rain triggered landslides, demolished roads, caused bridges to collapse, and resulted in power and water outages. The floods were set off by a week-long downpour, causing rivers to breach their banks and flood entire towns. In Porto Alegre, the state capital, the Guaíba River overflowed its banks, inundating streets.
Esse cachorro já é. Não, mas eu acho que se cobrir a torre da igreja lá, daí não é coisa pra ser. Vai cobrir terra aí também, ó.
The city's international airport, Salgado Filho Airport, had to indefinitely suspend all flights as the runways and lobbies were flooded. This led to significant disruptions in travel and transportation, with stranded passengers resorting to car rentals to exit the city. The Brazilian Airlines Association said on Tuesday that the airport in Porto Alegre would remain closed until at least the end of the month after the Guaíba River burst its banks and flooded the runway and key buildings. The disaster claimed a minimum of 90 lives, left over 100 individuals unaccounted for, and displaced more than 88,000 people. The scale of the devastation was unparalleled, with landslides, washed out roads, and collapsed bridges dotting the state. The rainfall was so severe that in certain areas, such as valleys, mountain slopes, and cities, more than 300 millimeters, 11.8 inches, of rain fell in less than a week. On Monday morning, the Guaíba River reached a record height of 5.34 meters, 17.6 feet, exceeding levels observed during a historic flood in 1941. In some cities, the water levels were the highest since records began nearly 150 years ago. Over 820,000 people were left without access to water, and power and communication lines were severed. The floods had a profound impact, affecting not just the inhabitants, but also the region's infrastructure and economy. The floods also disrupted the soy harvest and suspended operations at several meat processing plants, potentially impacting Brazil's economy. Brazil's president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, visited the state to meet with local officials and express his support. He characterized the floods as among the most severe Brazil had ever experienced. Never before in the history of Brazil had there been such a quantity of rain in one single location, he informed reporters. The Brazilian government responded promptly to the crisis. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva made a second visit to Rio Grande do Sul on Sunday, accompanied by several ministers. They surveyed the flooded streets of Porto Alegre from a helicopter and pledged federal aid for the state. Rescue operations were hindered by the flooding, with dozens of people still awaiting evacuation from their afflicted homes. Despite the obstacles, residents and volunteers banded together to assist with rescues. In the town of Canoas, residents waded through waist-deep, muddy water and formed a human chain to pull boats carrying evacuees to safety. Colonel José Carlos Salet, sub-commander of Rio Grande do Sul military firefighters, told CNN on Sunday that approximately 1,000 firefighters are working on rescue missions. When the rain stops, they have been doing short operations to save as many people as possible. Yesterday, Saturday, were we able to intensify operations, Salet said. Videos show muddy brown waters rising as high as rooftops in some areas, while rescue teams were out with inflatable rafts, taking people and pets on board.